Definitivamente la vicuña es la fibra textil más fina y lujosa. Es utilizada para productos muy exclusivos y un precio muy, muy alto.
Blazer made out of vicuña for $25,000.
En Europa, una capa de vicuña, unos 22.000 euros.
Surprisingly, staying here, Johnny Depp, we had David Beckham.
Es un mercado guiado por la oferta y la demanda. La oferta viene justamente por las casas de lujo, buscando siempre un mercado exclusivo.
Why vicuña is so expensive? The market has to be educated in what they're getting, because this is about understanding why are you getting it.
El género jamélido se remonta hasta las épocas pre-incas. Tenemos más de 5.000 años de historia textil en este país.
In times of the Inca, there were millions. When the Spaniards came, they brought sheep with diseases. They wanted the pastures, so they killed the vicuña, and they just slaughtered them. It picked up steam when camelid fiber became processed and popular in Europe. And somebody brought some vicuña fiber to Europe, and they said, oh, this is way softer than cashmere. There's nothing this fine. So the poachers just go out and shoot them. Just kill them all, skin them, and leave the dead bodies. Then the governments kind of panicked, and they said, we can't have this. This is our national heritage. You understand, the vicuña's on the flag of Peru. The vicuña's on their coin. The vicuña is a mystical part of Peru's history, and they were killing. By the time Dr. Franklin got there were probably 5,000 vicuñas in the whole world. And for a species, that's almost extinct.
As a scientist, I've always looked for answers to questions that people hadn't answered before, and actually into questions that hadn't even been asked before. And eventually, after having done research around the country, I decided that I really was passionately in love with doing field studies on the vicuña and the guanaco in South America. The first time I went to Peru was in 1968 with a wonderful wife, a baby that was 3 months old, and we had 2 dogs. My baby spent the first month and a half in Lima, Peru, sleeping in a suitcase because we were waiting for housing that we lived for while I did my field studies.
It is awesome country, where the geography still dominates man and wildlife abounds.
When I first went there was in the winter. The days actually are quite nice. They're in the 60s and 70s, but nights get very cold. In fact, the stream next to where my cabin, within a half an hour after sunset, the stream froze. At sunset, you got into your sleeping bag real fast because there was no heating. And if I wanted to read or write my field notes, I had to light 6 to 8 candles on the table next to my bed. It was cold, dreary, dry, vegetation was all brown. I got high altitude sickness, and I was like, whoa, this is where I'm gonna be for the next 3 or 4 years. I was like, uh-oh, what have I done?
The natural fibers are measured by microns. The lower the micronage, the finest the fiber is.
La lana de oveja, una lana fina, es 17, 16 micras de grosor. La alpaca, la más fina, puede llegar a 18, 19. La vicuña tiene en promedio 12 micras. No existe ninguna otra fibra de animal más fina que la vicuña. Salamanca es una empresa creada para dar servicio a todas las personas que no tienen la oportunidad de tener la tecnología última de procesamiento y acabado de telas, pero no solo hacerles, sino ayudarlos a crear el artículo.
Con Textil Alpaca lo que hacemos es exportar básicamente. Entonces, para conseguir clientes vamos a ferias, por ejemplo, Ambiente en Frankfurt, Maison Object en París, donde tenemos stands propios y ahí promocionamos. Ahí es donde llegan los buyers de diferentes marcas del mundo, ¿no? Los mercados más importantes es Estados Unidos y Europa. Normalmente los que asisten son buyers de grandes marcas internacionales, como por ejemplo el grupo Louis Vuitton, o marcas chicas también, desde pequeños a retailers grandes.
Si tienes una pirámide de valor, en la base de la pirámide tienes las fibras básicas, las que tienen, digamos, mayor producción a nivel mundial. Probablemente ahí se encuentra la lana, probablemente ahí se encuentra también la seda, ¿no? O el algodón, hablando de fibras naturales, ¿no? Sigue subiendo y tienes otra capa, digamos, de fibras naturales que tienen mucho menor producción, pero que también tienen bastante demanda porque son fibras preciosas, ¿no? O preciadas. Y ahí está la alpaca, está la llama, está el cashmere, está el yak, por ejemplo. Y sigue subiendo la pirámide y en la parte de arriba tienes a la vicuña.
¿Por qué ha desarrollado la vicuña este tipo de pelaje tan suave y tan singular? Yo uso siempre una especie de broma. Digo, donde viven estos animales hay solo dos estaciones, el invierno y la estación del ferrocarril. Porque ahí hace frío todo el año. Entonces estos animales han desarrollado un pelo que les permite protegerse de esta inclemencia.
You're in the high altitudes of the Andes, and it's a very special place. So as I got accustomed to the place, the animals and the elevation, the headaches went away, the joint aches went away. You fall in love with the land because you started to notice the people, the vicuña, and so you realize that this is a beautiful ecosystem. Even though you're 14,000 feet, it grew on me, and I eventually didn't want to leave. The first 6 months was getting my feet on the ground, figuring out exactly what and where and how. And once that was going, we started collecting very useful information. The vicuña wool that has been its demise over the years, over the centuries, is because it has very fine wool, and they've been very heavily persecuted for that wool and killed in a variety of ways, anything from helicopters to machine guns to poisoning of springs, water, shooting. The wool was sold on the international market for hundreds of dollars per pound. There was a black market for it, and it was exported to Europe, to Italy and France and England. And so, where at one time there were probably multi-millions of vicuñas in Peru and the Central Andes, when I started my studies in the 60s, there was 5,000 to 10,000. And they were quickly becoming close to extinction.
We are at Northwest Alpaca's ranch. This is where myself and my family have lived over 30 years. I lived in the city. Back in my past life, I was a real estate developer and a builder. And then as I grew older and got married and decided to have a family, I wanted to live on a farm with the kids because I grew up on a farm. My father and I bought 5 of the first 50 animals imported into the United States. They were actually imported from Chile. Then they started coming a little more and a little more. and we realized the best alpacas in the world were from Peru. At first, it was a hobby, and then we started making money, and we started breeding, and just became an obsession. I started writing books, I started traveling to Peru. I became fully immersed in alpacas. Vicuñas are another story, but I really didn't know anything about them until a friend of mine in Peru, a textile industrialist, called and asked if I'd like to come to Peru. I said, of course, and I was writing for magazines at the time, and so I said I can. He wanted me to do articles on the Vicuña, so he invited me to Peru. And so then he said, do you know Bill Franklin? And I said, oh yeah, I know Bill. And he said, well, could you invite him to come as well, please? So I invited him to go to Peru, and together we went on this journey. And we ended up in Pampa Galeras, where Bill had done most of his research in the past. We were together for 2 weeks, and I was like an undergraduate student, listening to the professor, pointing this and this, and it was like a rush of knowledge that I really didn't know anything about.
Pampa Galeras. Wow, what a great place. You drive up the west face of the Andes and you come up to 14,000 feet and all of a sudden, bang, you're in level. And right there, this beautiful Pampa. That's the building that I lived in when I was there during the late 60s and early 70s. Somehow I had an eye for taking pictures, which I didn't realize until I picked up a camera. I kept looking for how can I get a picture that represents the image of this animal. I looked for opportunities for backlighting, sunset, sunrise, very soft lighting at the end of a storm. I got very sensitive about lighting. After all, I was at 14,000 feet, so the air was very, very clean. 80s with a baby guanaco or a chilango. Her name was Ona. Occasionally, I'd have visitors come and visit me on my project, international photographers, cinematographers, and there was one gentleman from Germany who was doing splendid cinematography on wildlife in Peru. And he was in our home for dinner, and I asked him if he might be interested in seeing some pictures, and he said, yeah, I'd love to. And he said, wow, he said, you got some good stuff. You should do something with this. He said, have you ever thought about publishing in National Geographic? I said, oh yeah, of course, but I have no idea how to do that. I wouldn't know who to approach or whatever. He said, well, you ought to write Mary Griswold Smith, who's one of the editors at the magazine, and tell her that I suggested that you write her and tell her what you're doing. I said, okay. So I did. Wrote a letter, let it set for a day or two, and rewrote it. Let it set for another day or so, and rewrote it. Ended up with a page and a half, and I sent it off, and I got an answer a number of weeks later. There was no email. There were no telephones that were reliable to use. So she asked me, they were interested, what would I like? So I answered and said, I'd like some film and some equipment. And they said, well, we can provide you with film. Mary Griswold Smith became like a second mother. I was impressed by the quality that they demanded, the strictness of the accuracy of the message to be told, both visually and in writing. The story can be the most golden story in the world. You need to be able to convey your message visually, and I was fortunate enough to get some very fine pictures, and the rest is history.
El imperio de los camélidos se remonta hasta las épocas pre-incas, ¿no? O sea, tenemos más de 5.000 años de historia textil en este país. todas las culturas precolombinas tienen algo de textilería que se ha venido trabajando y donde se ha venido viendo el uso tanto de algodón y ya en cosas más finas o más especiales la alpaca y allá en las muy especiales la vicuña, ¿no? Por ejemplo, se dice que para los incas era exclusiva y reservada la vicuña, ¿no?
The Inca's system of management, not only for the vicuña, but for the alpacas, they were the first people to breed black alpacas to black alpacas, white alpacas to white alpacas, and they kept them in separate pastures. When you see their textiles, they're some of the finest in the world. They didn't dye it, they were made of natural colors, and so they separated them into colors and kept them in different pastures, different corrals, and they're the first ones that developed the colors. The Incas actually developed 75 colors of alpaca. Those colors are still used today on Mitchell Company's color cards.
Hablemos de los camélidos sudamericanos, son de la misma familia que los camellos. Son 4 camélidos, alpaca, vicuña, llama y guanaco. Y las fibras más finas vienen definitivamente de la vicuña y comercialmente hablando la alpaca es la más importante. Nosotros tenemos un abrigo en cuna, un abrigo que le llamamos Anastasia, que es nuestro abrigo tradicional, que sale al mercado a un nivel de precio más o menos de $1,000. Un abrigo similar de vicuña estamos hablando de $25,000. Definitivamente la vicuña es la fibra textil de origen animal más fina del mundo, más fina y lujosa. Es utilizada para productos muy exclusivos y de un precio muy, muy alto.
Recordemos que la alpaca es un animalito que ha evolucionado desde la vicuña hasta convertirse en un animal doméstico en perfecto equilibrio con un ecosistema tan delicado. Tenemos que respetar el normal comportamiento de la vicuña, sus costumbres reproductivas, sus costumbres de alimentación, de migración de un lugar a otro. Entonces, la extensión que se requiere para criar alpacas no es la misma que la extensión que se requiere para conservar a la vicuña. A la vicuña no se le cría, es un animal silvestre, tiene que ser conservado.
Medio kilo de vicuña hoy día escogida te cuesta alrededor de $500, $600. Y no has hecho nada, solamente la has escogido y es materia prima. La alpaca está en 10, el cashmere tal vez esté en 15, entonces es un mundo de diferencia.
La diferencia es marcada, porque de vicuña tienes alrededor de 8 a 9 toneladas de fibra anuales sin deserdar, y en la alpaca tienes 7 millones de kilos.
Ahora, lógicamente, la escasez viene asociada con el incremento de precio. En los años 60, a mediados de los años 60, había no más de 5,000 vicuñas.
As a scientist, my first mission is to understand the basic science of the animal, collect the data that provides the evidence to justify my conclusions. But at the same time, I felt a strong obligation to get the message out to the world as to how special these animals were, that they were endangered, they needed international help and support. I published both in Spanish and in English. I published also articles in Peru in Spanish because I wanted the message to get out to Peruvians. And so working with the Conservation Foundation and World Wildlife Fund multiplied into their getting the message out also based upon studies that I had done there. The question being what happened and why did they recover? How were they saved from potential extinction? That population that I worked with in Pampagaleros in southern Peru was actually the largest remaining population in the world. And because the Peruvians took notice that this was an important population and they had international interest from United Nations, IUCN, FAO. There was interest in doing something about saving these animals.
Bill Franklin did his studies, and he was the first one to really understand all the things that you needed to know to preserve them. Without the science, you can't really know how to rescue them. And he created that science. And then he published those papers, but he took it one step farther. He got published in National Geographic. And it became a story not just for Peru, but when he went in National Geographic, it became a story to the world because everybody saw that. And then all of a sudden, different resources started coming to play. You know, the Italians got involved, the industrialists, because they realized they had a national treasure and they had to preserve it. Years after he published that story, Fujimori was elected president of Peru. He felt politically beholden to the highland people who voted him in. Fujimori made it legal to sell the fiber from a live animal.
Managing these animals as a high-altitude, remote species was challenging for the government that was based along the coast in the cities of Arequipa, Lima, and so forth. And so, even though there were laws protecting these animals, they were very difficult to enforce. The programs were not entirely successful. In fact, in some areas, they weren't successful at all.
And so the Pampa-Galeras Reserve was created. And they started protecting them with park rangers, with guns to ward off the poachers. And it kind of worked. They stabilized the population around 5,000, but it wasn't growing because they had a limited area. And these animals, they graze a certain area. They're not migratory. They're stationary and they're grazing. So Pampa-Galeras could only hold so many. But it stopped it, and then people started to be aware of the danger of losing what was, in essence, Peruvians' national heritage.
But eventually the government said, this is beyond our abilities to deal with this situation. And they made an incredible decision of saying, okay, return the ownership of these animals back to the people of the mountains, the indigenous people, the communities. You're now in charge of to take care of them, to manage them, and to harvest them for their wool. When you harvest the wool, the profits that are generated are for you. Well, now these people are the protectors and the utilizers of the species.
Fujimori said, you have to get the fiber from a live animal, and you have to release the animal back into the wild. So the battle cry became, to save a vicuña, you shear a vicuña. In the 90s, I went to Peru many, many times, importing animals, meeting people, knowing the breeders. And so I started asking, who is the greatest alpaca breeder in Peru? Everybody said one man's name, Don Julio Barreda. He had his herd, which was, the name is a coyo, the most famous alpaca herd in the world. He invited me to his farm. And so I said, Don Julio, I would like to write a book about you. I want to write your history, your story I traveled to Peru maybe 5 times to interview him. He gave me all his old records, his pedigree. He told me his breeding secrets. And we were sitting on the square in Makasani by a coffee shop having a cup of coffee. I said, "We're done. Thank you so much." And he was bringing a cup of coffee to his lips and he stopped. And he said, "Mike, I have a question. Is there anything you can do for my people?" And, you know, it hit me because he was giving to me, right? And my dentist interpreter said, "Well, could we do dental work?" And Don Julio said, "Bueno." There was a line of people 3 blocks down around the corner, and for 10 days, that line never got shorter.
And one night, the leaders of Picotani, which I had really never heard of, came to the door and said, "We understand that you're doing dental work." And we said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, we have children that need help with their teeth."
My team has been back to Picotani every year since, maybe multiple times in some instances. The nature of our work with them has changed because we've learned more about how we could help them from them.
Most of the alpacas that I have left here, I might own maybe 20 of all these on the ranch. We still harvest the fiber, but to be honest with you now, we love the alpacas, so we want a few of them around, and plus they attract people. Everybody's interested. So now it's more of a hobby. Before it was a business. I put 4 kids through college, I built the ranch, everything with the alpacas. But now it's a hobby because I'm in retirement, and I spend almost all my time at Quechua Benefit.
I started Quechua Benefit to gain the appreciation of my close friend, Don Julio Beretta. I had purely selfish motives. I had no idea the journey it would take me on.
This is Quechua Benefit, but what we basically do is raise money in the United States and send it to our office in Peru for all of our programs.
We built a charity in Peru, 100% Peruvian, no gringos. We're in the background. They know our people on the ground. And they work their own solutions out and come to us for some help. What you have to understand when you want to help them, the first principle is do no harm. You can't decide something for them that you think is good, and it could be harmful. They know best what's for them. It's taken us 25 years to not make mistakes, to do no harm. Now I'd like to see the charity spend 25 years implementing that knowledge.
Okay, I just have to grab my trip file. We're ready to go. You know, people ask me, what is Picotani like? What will we expect? And it's so unique that until you see it, you really can't appreciate what it is. It's kind of like going to the Amazon jungle. People can tell you about the jungle, but until you're there, you don't realize what it is. So the trip that's ahead of us all is we'll fly into Lima. We'll stay there 2 or 3 days to acclimate. And then we basically start straight up the mountain and we'll drive to Picotani, which is 15 to 16,000 feet. And I've got to tell you that you have to be ready because your lungs are going to find a new environment that they've never experienced before.
The Vicuña live in the middle of nowhere.
It's probably the highest elevations and the most severe conditions that humans can survive. There's no road, there's no GPS, there's no Google Maps. You have to know where you're going.
La infraestructura vial no te permite hacer un trazo en línea recta.
Inclusive hay zonas en las que no hay carreteras, que el acceso es muy complicado.
They're on the rooftop of the world. They're on the edge of the limit of where people could live. You take people living in the United States, they couldn't live there 10 days. They couldn't exist there. They wouldn't make it.
Picotani, it's one of the more unique places on all the earth. It has the animals, the mountains, the rivers, the grasslands. It's untouched, it's pure. And that's the experience you're going to have.
Picotani is the vicuna capital of the world. They have the most animals, they have the best animals, because they have room to grow.
Todo lo que vemos es el sector de Picotani, la comunidad de Picotani. En general hay una recuperación bastante de la vicuña como actividad, pero en Picotani es un modelo especial de éxito. Partieron de 100, 80 vicuñas, como dicen sus dirigentes primigenios. Ahora estamos alrededor sobre los 10.000 animales. Y eso lo han logrado en los últimos años, ¿no? Con 20 años.
Donde nos encontramos era la ganadera Picotani en los años 50, 60, de la ganadera del tiempo de los patrones. En el año 85 pasan a formar las comunidades campesinas.
Individuals don't own the land. They have this concept of communities. When you say the word community in Peru, it's more than just that little town down in the valley. It's the whole surrounding region. It's a very generous system based upon how it used to be during the Inca system. It's been handed down over the decades, over the centuries.
Las tres comunidades son dueñas de estos terrenos. Lo utilizamos exclusivamente para el pastoreo de las vicuñas. La vicuña anualmente nos da unos ingresos económicos para poder mantenernos lo que es nuestra organización, la multicomunal, ¿no? Hacemos inversión, ¿no? Es una cosa muy importante para nosotros.
Bastante hemos trabajado porque casi no había nada en aquellos tiempos. Nadie no pensó que se iba a extender esa cantidad.
El otro que hemos hecho es ampliar los cercos que está al otro lado, en otra comunidad. Hemos comprado 450 hectáreas porque necesitamos más espacio para poder trasladar vicuñas, para que estén muy saludables, tranquilos. Por eso hemos ido ampliando.
They aren't trying to buy a fancy truck. They're not trying to buy new clothes. They want new habitat that they can put more animals on. That's their investment vehicle.
If you go to New York City or Chicago or Tokyo and walk in the most expensive clothing boutique in that city, there might be only 2 or 3 of them that have the most expensive. And you go to the rack, you'll see vicuña and you'll feel it. Then when you turn over the price tag, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. It is the rarest commercial fiber in the world. And so they can ask what they please.
The jacket is 12,000. The capes are 10,000. Sometimes we make a small courtesy discount, but very short. This place is Johnville. It's part of the Napa Valley, the heart of the wine tasting vineyards and the tourists. We bought all our high-end products, alpacas and vicuñas from alpaca collection, and we have been successful.
We have people, especially from Los Angeles, from Hollywood. We have many stars from TV and movies.
So we made some fascinators, and then they sent us the pictures. But this was customers from this store. I never know them, but we did for them.
One of the most interesting parts of this story is the huge distance between the producers and the wealthiest consumers. They've always had that spread, but the vicuña brought them much closer together. And here's what it changed in the consciousness of the Quechua people. They could demand the price. And they changed the whole system of sales of camelid fiber in Peru.
Every kilo of fiber, every piece of yarn, like every item needs an ID that is regulated by the Peruvian government. On top of that, to get the product into the United States, you need to have an importer's license from the Fish and Live Wild organization here in America. So with both documents, the one from the Peruvian government, the CITES, and your importer's license, that's the only way to legally bring the vicuña products into America.
Yo soy artesano, exclusivamente me dedico a productos de fibra de vicuña. Este poncho cuesta con su marca, con su certificado que me da Serforge, cuesta más de $2,000. Tengo maestras que se dedican a descerdar. Otros son los que tienen que hilar y otros son los que tienen que tejer. Es importante porque damos el trabajo, ganamos algo y también nuestro orgullo que la vicuña es parte de nuestra vivencia cultural. Está en nuestro escudo,
Está en nuestro DNI de todos los peruanos y peruanas. Por ahí un poco que esta fibra, oro caminante de las punas, lo denominan algunos.
The Vicuña Salvation, saving from extinction, is the greatest conservation success story never told. And so it's an amazing story because people got their act together, international effort, national efforts to save this animal. It was a challenge because the poachers were relentless. They wanted to continue hunting these animals, and there have been problems, there still are problems today with poaching.
En el Perú ha habido demasiado caza furtiva. Inclusive en un cerco permanente, Cuyuch, es mi comunidad de Cuyo, Maranganí, han matado 60 vicuñas, solamente al cuello se lo han llevado. Ahora sí, más bien nos hemos organizado por rondas campesinas que cuidamos, ya no hay caza furtiva por aquí.
Una gran parte de la sierra se protegen ellos mismos, a veces muy criticada la ronda campesina, pero uno tiene que subir a la sierra, entender lo que es la sierra peruana. Las condiciones son muy duras y si es que uno no pasa tiempo ahí, no lo entiende.
They formed militias. They had 24 rifles and 1 pistol, and they had 25 guards on their animals all the time.
The people of Picotani are the true heroes of the conservation project for Vicuña. They started in the late 50s, early 60s, protecting Vicuña within their environment. And this was before the government was involved, before they changed the endangered species laws, before Bill Franklin went to Pampa Galeras. And they believe very much in Pachamama, or Mother Nature, and the laws of Mother Nature. And what that means is that the wild animals are to be left and to be cherished, not to be hunted, not to be destroyed. Picotani has captured my heart because they're so pure. And they have an innocence, but yet a worldly wisdom that makes them absolutely authentic, genuine. I've become friends with the people. I see them every year, sometimes 2 times a year, and we have a mutual respect, even though we're from wildly different places in the world. They could not even imagine where I live, and before I went to Picotani, I could not have imagined where they live. But somehow together we have a common language. Their respect for nature and for the vicuña and for the alpaca. Not only are they buying new lands to expand their vicuña habitat, but they've allowed them to build water projects so that they can bring snow runoff into the natural catch basins that create the environment that make it friendly for vicuña.
Es la más fundamental, el recurso agua. No es tan estable como antes, es preocupante nuestra situación.
Picotani y muchas comunidades a nivel nacional están sufriendo este tema del agua. El tema del cambio climático ha empeorado la situación del agua. Si no se le da asistencia técnica, no se le da el apoyo, pues la vicuña no solo se extinguiría en Picotani, sino a nivel nacional.
They know everything about moving water, ancestral or historic understanding of moving water. They just need a little help.
De esta represa está yendo a llevar el agua para el Comité Multicomunal Vicuñas Picotani. Y a estas alturas no contamos con el agua. Por eso hemos visto y tenerlo como un reservorio de agua y para mantener nuestra crianza de vicuñas.
Dry season makes it difficult for vicuña to drink because they all stay in the same area. So you have to find a natural flow way to get water to them. And that's what, working with this community, that is the solution that we've produced.
Ahorita nos encontramos viendo la comunidad campesina Picotani, en el lugar donde viene el tendido del entubado que viene de la represa de Ocoña y de donde nosotros empezamos a captar el agua para luego llevarlo al cerco 1 primordial para el consumo de nuestras vicuñas para el tiempo de estiaje.
La cultura quechua, la cultura andina, es muy emocional. Para ellos, el hombre no está por encima y el recurso animal es uno, el recurso tierra, el recurso agua, el recurso financiero, mano de obra, no. Él es parte de un todo. Él cuida a la alpaca y a la vicuña, la cuida porque la vicuña y la alpaca le va a dar sustento. Y la alpaca y la vicuña, según las creencias, cuidan al hombre también y le agradecen al hombre porque el hombre la cuida.
El Perú está ubicado en el medio de Sudamérica y logísticamente para las líneas aéreas y para todo el tráfico mundial de bienes y servicios, el Perú y Lima principalmente se vuelven un hub logístico y un hub también de recepción de turistas. De hecho, Perú, la estrategia mundial que tiene para turismo es mucho más cultural, histórico, desarrollando turismo de aventura también, pero por supuesto con los bienes que tenemos como el café, el cacao, la alpaca, la vicuña, las olas, el surf que tenemos aquí, se vuelve pues un destino muy específico. Primero, la vicuña pertenece a un portafolio de fibras que hacen del Perú una potencia muy importante en la industria de la moda a nivel mundial. Y la vicuña es la fibra número 1 en la calidad, la sostenibilidad. Entonces la sostenibilidad no solo es que tienes un buen manejo ambiental, un buen manejo hídrico, un buen manejo con tu comunidad, sino que finalmente la cadena de distribución mundial tiene sostenibilidad, porque desde el más importante comprador global está trabajando con comunidades, en el diseño, en la fabricación, en el empaque, en el desarrollo final del producto, y eso realmente le da estos números que tenemos no solo en cabezas de vicuña, sino en el comercio exterior peruano que ha crecido exponencialmente durante los últimos años y de hecho va a seguir creciendo.
Ahora se está trabajando, las empresas de hilandería están trabajando en la trazabilidad, en el cual uno puede trazar por el código del lote del hilado que ha llegado de qué comunidad fue. Que el cliente pueda escanear en un código QR en la etiqueta y poder ver de qué animal es el que ha sido esquilado.
Tenemos circunstancias internacionales en donde están exigiendo al máximo los temas de uso hídrico, de temas ambientales, de temas sociales, de la circularidad y diferentes aspectos que hacen la sostenibilidad de una comunidad y también de un producto. Y en eso, este vuelco de darles a ellos la posibilidad de que ellos mismos manejen
las diferentes cabezas y ganados que tienen ellos en Vicuña, ha significado pues esta fortaleza de volver a la ancestralidad, a lo que era antes, a la tradición, a la cosmovisión andina, para que a través de esta cosmovisión nosotros nos volvamos una potencia en esta fibra tan lujosa que tenemos que ver en la Vicuña.
Todos los peruanos somos dueños de las vicuñas. Lo único que pasa acá es de que el gobierno se las da en cesión de uso a las comunidades. En cesión de uso quiere decir, cuídalas y lo que puedas recibir de ellas quedan para ustedes.
El producto de la venta de la fibra no se va a distribuir entre los incomuneros, sino se utiliza por ley para acciones o presupuestos de beneficio comunal.
Utilizar adecuadamente y racionalmente la fibra de vicuña para que todas las comunidades donde haya vicuña puedan hacer el chaccu y hacer protección, manejo y conservación de los animales.
What you have a Quechua people who have an ethic of respecting wild animals. They don't take more than they can use. So now they have an ability to raise vicuña in a sustainable fashion and harvest the fleece, they're still alive, and sell the fleece.
After my research, a pair of scientists from Germany came to Pampaleras, Rudolf Hoffmann and Odi, who were two German scientists, and they were very instrumental in emphasizing the importance of managing these animals on a sustained basis by live capture and how to do a replica of the Inca style of chacus, chaccu meaning a roundup of live animals.
Everything about the chaccu is a vibrant, life-fulfilling. It's almost spiritual, how it makes you feel. It's a wonderful experience. When you go to the chaccu, you see the shaman giving thanks to Pachamama. You see the people are happy, you see the expressions on their face. They're truly alive.
Lo más rápido, hermanos, organizar nuestros grupos a nuestro arreo, porque nos va a ganar tiempo. Ya estamos sobre la hora, hermanos.
Es todo un ritual que viene desde la época inca. Como es un animal salvaje y es un animal muy estresable, no es fácil poder esquilarlo. Entonces la única manera de hacerlo es formar cadenas humanas dentro de un área bastante extensa y empujar a los animales hacia un embudo.
Que tiene la gente, porque uno puede pensar el chaccu es una cosa simple, no es simple. Hay que dormir a la intemperie durante 2-3 semanas, porque no es que las vicuñas están en un sitio, tienes que ir coleccionándolas, juntándolas, espantándolas, y no es que dices, son las 6 de la tarde, me voy a mi casa, no, te quedas ahí a dormir. Normalmente el espectáculo que vemos todos, en que reúnes 500, 1000 vicuñas, es el trabajo de la comunidad de 2, 3 semanas.
It was one of the most beautiful parties with people that I didn't know, which is get the beautiful fiber from this animal without hurting them.
Historically, and before the Spaniards came in, or prehistoric, the vicuña was important for harvesting for its wool. The wool was only used by the royal Incas. They were so terribly treated by the invaders, and since then they've been abused by upper classes of society. They're not appreciated for who they are. But now, today, communities that have been socioeconomically deprived over the centuries, they're now benefiting from the harvesting of wool from these animals on a sustained basis, where they live capture and shear the animals. So they're managing for the wool that's being marketed. The profits are being used for community buildings, for schools, for roads, for hospitals, for public utilities. So in remote areas, the harvesting of the wool from the vicuñas is becoming very important.
The future of Picotani is in the people's hands.
The last time I saw Bill Franklin was in 1995. And I'm so excited because we're going back to Mason City, Iowa, where he lived. And we're going to visit his farm. So it will be the first time I've seen him in 25 years.
The first time I met Mike was that I recall in my young age. We'd been traveling together. I know we have. We traveled from Lima to Nazca to Pampa Galeras. Was no place more special than Pampa Galeras. My image of Mike is when he and I were at Pampa Galeras for a chaccu. He was enthralled by the whole process. He was taking pictures, watching what was going on. He was like a little boy in a candy store. Since that early meeting, he's grown. Quechua Benefit has been a surprise. And my experience with it is that their theme is giving. They're not there for a profit. They're not there to gain or take away. They're there to leave something, leave a contribution, help the people in their health, in their education, the health of the animals, health of the people.
I'm retired. I did well in the construction industry. I did well in the alpaca industry. I'm never going to miss a meal. And so what I want to do is, this might be a trite phase, is to give back.
I have hanging in my office to this day 2 pictures side by side. One is the countries of South America, and one is the relief, the topography. I don't know why I did it, and somehow they got saved over the years. So to this day, I have 2 beautiful crayon images of South America hanging in my office that I did a few years ago when I was in 3rd grade.
Bill Franklin is a genius. to understand wildlife, understand nature, understand sustainability and conservation. Bill is a very humble person. He doesn't realize what he's done for all those people in the highlands.
I don't want to be a legend. I want to be just one person who made some contributions to the welfare and understanding of some animals that I studied for many years in a very strange, wonderful land, different land. I want to be known as someone who left behind a greater understanding of the land, of the animals, and the people. That's all. I'm just one of many. The Vicuña Salvation, saving from extinction, is the greatest conservation success story never told. It wasn't one country, it wasn't one organization, it wasn't one group of people, it was a multitude of different approaches. There was interest in doing something about saving these animals. It's been a challenge to get started. Lots of animals are now being protected. Lots of animals are being harvested for the wool. It's become very, very successful. And who knows by all the different benefits that these species represent in the future. I mean, they were here first. We're newcomers on this world. It's not our role to dominate them, it's our role to accommodate to them.